Team up, dream up. For girls, finding your team is game-changing, which is why Metrobank are championing the growth of women and girls cricket across England and Wales. Their mission is to create a brighter future for girls through cricket in partnership with the ECB. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast. India win the series with a game to go, bouncing back from defeat at the Kia Oval with a comfortable victory up in Manchester after India's spinners tied down the England innings throughout. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Katya Witney and Ben Gardner. But first, let's go to Lauren Winfield-Hill. Lauren, it's 3-1 India with a game to go. England don't lose a lot of T20I series at home. They lost against Sri Lanka a couple of years, but you have to go quite a long way back. So the last time they lost a home series in T20I cricket. What do you think's gone wrong with the batting in particular? There was that win at the Oval, sure, but Old Trafford, England got really stuck. A lot of the players got in, faced a lot of balls, didn't score very fluently, and gave it away before they really kicked on.
Yeah, I think well, the middle order's under fire big time, isn't it? Because that collapse at the Oval was like the worst ever collapse. I think there was another collapse against India actually as well that was like the only one that was secondary to that. And then again, pretty much, at Old Trafford, nobody really got going. But on a slow surface, when you lose early wickets, then you're relying on your middle order to make a contribution. But I just don't think like the senior play, like for me, is like your Paige Schofields. Alice Capsey's under pressure, but she's young. Like she's not somebody that I think should be under as much pressure because she's still got time. Like you're looking ahead to the T20 World Cup for Alice Capsey. Like you're not necessarily worried about right now. But for me, it's the senior players that need to be match winners. Like be the ones, how many times has it happened in recent times where that batting lineup 1 to 6, 1 to 7 has been player of the match? Like it's when you take out Heather and Nat, nobody's really putting their hand up, and that's what you need when you lose big players like that. You need your Danny Wyatts, your Amy Joneses, you need those players to go, well, I'm gonna carry the boat here. And it's just not happening. I think Dunkley's been great. I think she's played really nicely. I don't think there's like a shot with her where you think, oh, she got that really wrong. It's probably more just a bit of execution, which you can take that. But when it's the shot selection that's wrong, and quite a lot, hitting it straight down long on's throat or trying to go over the offside on a slow wicket, like poor choices are a lot. That's we spoke a little bit at the end of the game about it's about the mental, like the mental side of the game in handling pressure, but also the method. It can't just be see ball, hit ball. Like there has to be method, which changes on every surface against every bowling attack. And to be honest, even within a series against the same bowling attack, because if they're not necessarily going to keep bowling the same way or doing the same things or having the same plans. So it's that ability to come up with a plan and have good method in the moment, which I think England have fallen short on. It's not about can you play a cover drive, can you ramp, can you reverse sweep, how good's your technique. Like I think a lot of it is, you practice your skills and you keep your technique in good order, but it's not like that's not what needs to be trained in this scenario.
So, for example, in the Manchester game, do you think England just failed to adapt to a slightly different pitch to the one that they found at the Oval?
Yeah, and you're probably not going to get two more contrasting pitches in England at the minute. You've got oval, which is hard, flat, pace, bounce, quick outfield, can score quite heavily square of the wicket. Manchester's always tended to be slower and lower, quite hard to hit square because of that. Generally, things go higher up the ground because it's slower. You haven't got the bounce and the pace to work with and score, square of the wicket. Hard to hit over the top at times because you don't get the same bounce and elevation. And the outfield was pretty lush. It was pretty thick. especially into the pockets. You could see even that the outfield was a lot thicker and slower, and the boundaries were bigger. There were 65 the whole way round, so it was very different to the oval. But you've got to be better. Every surface is going to be different. Like it's no different if you play one day and the sun's shining, and the next day, it's miserly and it's seaming around or whatever. Like every game is presents a different challenge.
Mm. When you look at the Indian bowling attack, we were talking about it before the series and saying that it's not hugely experienced. Why do you think England has struggled so much this series? Is it a quality thing? Because maybe I'm not giving India enough credit, but when I'm watching them in the field, I don't necessarily think this is miles above the standard that the top players in the English domestic game are at. Obviously, the Indian top order is gun, but as a bowling attack, why have they had so much success against this, as you say, actually very experienced England side, even though Natsir Abroad and Heather Knight aren't there?
Yeah, I feel like a bit of a plonker to be honest, because at the start of the series, the first game at Trent Bridge, I said, "Oh, India's top six are probably the best in the world." I think, like on paper, that is a gun top six. If you take out Natsir Brunt and Heather Knight, it's a better top six than England at the minute. It's arguably as good as Australia. But I was concerned about their bowling attack and the inexperience and the fielding. And haven't I been proved wrong? Because they've been exceptional in the field. Like they're cutting twos. Arundhati Reddy, Radha Yadav have been absolutely gun in the field, which does lead into the bowling. I think your bowling looks better when your fielding's red hot. And I think India have been red hot. They've cut twos, have taken their catches. And I don't think that bowling attack is extraordinary. I think England have just played poorly, batting wise against it. Um, they've used good changes of pace. They've bowled straight. Their spinners, there's no freebies. I think Shrey Tarani's been a great addition. She gets it above the eye line. She's willing to put a little bit of shape on the ball. Some really good changes of pace. You know what you're going to get from Dipti Sharma. Um, I don't think they've done anything extraordinary. Amanjot Kaur's a great all-rounder. I think she's added a lot to that team. You look at she's probably playing that Pooja for striker role. Um, but she's been great. She's bowled some short stuff for somebody quite small in stature. They've bowled straight. They've set good fields. Um, and really, like, I don't think there's a dismissal where you can go, oh, fair play. I've got a bit of a jaffer there. Like there's some times where there's been good options taken and mis-execution, which, like I say, you can always go, well, I'm just got to work on my execution. But actually, the choice was right. There's probably only a handful of those, but there's a lot of that was a poor shot. Was that the right option? And just like reading the game, like I spoke a little bit the other night about how Jemmy and Harman played their innings really nicely. They were both less than a run a ball for nearly 20 runs. And there was one over, there was the last ball of Lauren Bell's over that Jemmy smashed down the ground for four. And then they hit three boundaries, three fours in five balls. And that was the game then. Turned on a knife edge. And it's about reading those moments. I feel like they hung in there, and then when they got their opportunities, they flipped the scales in their favour. Whereas when England got an opportunity in a partnership in the first innings, they then played a poor shot and flipped the scales back to India. So it's like two, very similar situations where England had little micro partnerships, but nothing meaningful and going really big, whereas India sort of got themselves into that position and made sure that they were the one to get the job done.
What do you put that lack of awareness down to? Because as you say, there's a lot of games in this England side. They've played a lot of international cricket. Alice Capsey's the youngest player in the team, and even she's played 50, 60 times for England. Why is it that they don't have that game awareness compared to that Indian middle order?
Well, I think they do have the game awareness. We're just not seeing it at the minute. That was probably the one thing I think Lottie spoke really well and really honestly at the end of the game, but that talking about a transitioning side, I don't think is Maybe bowling attack is, the seam attack is slightly less experienced than, you're going back a lot of years though, aren't you? You're trying to go back to like your Anya Shrubsole and Catherine Brunt. But that top six, you've got Dunks and Danny over 100 games, you've got Jonesy over 100 games, Tammy over 200 games. Like that is not a transitioning side. You've probably got Paige and Capsy that have almost got a bit of a free pass as the inexperienced ones. But as you say, even then, Capsy's played a lot of games. Um, I think it's just pressure, and it's like trying to play a certain way and almost externally what's expected of you, trying to play a certain way, trying to hit boundaries, this brand and all, it's be positive, put pressure back onto the Indian bowlers. But it's like we've spoken about this before. It's like, what does that actually look like? Like, how does that play out for each individual? What's the timing of when you increase your intent and your risk, and things like that? And I think it's when it's easy and it's flat and everybody's flying, it's really easy, like to do, but harder to do when you get on a slower surface. And actually, you've got to almost come down a gear to have success. It's sort of against your ego and against the grain of the way in which the game's sort of played, or the perception of how it should be played, rather than what is needed. What does the team need from me right now? What does this pitch need from me right now? What does this bowling attack need from me right now? And it's not always going to look the same, but I feel like a lot of the options that the girls choose are the same regardless of situation, pitch, bowling attack, etc. And there's a lot more information that goes into decision making rather than, well, this is my strength, so I'm going to try and do it regardless of all those other factors. Sometimes, right, and I feel like I've sort of gone through this a bit with my batting. Is like people always used to say, like, stick to your strengths, play to your strengths. And then I'd be like, right, okay, well, I'm just going to hit down the ground because that's my strengths, right? And then it's like, oh, but I can reverse and I can lap and I can hard sweep, but traditionally my strengths are down the ground. And it's like, what's your strengths on that pitch in that moment? Not just on my personal development plan, it says I'm really good at hitting spin to the sight screen. Do you know what I mean? So it's more the details of that moment rather than just being, well, I can sweep, I can do this, I can do that. Well, yeah, you can, but what's the strengths in that moment?
I wanted to ask about pace. And we talked about it last week about how India's spinners bowl slightly slower than the English spinners do. And in the first couple of games, they had a lot of success bowling a little bit slower than England. More generally, do you think we almost overhype the importance of pace in the women's game? If you look at the last game in particular, so Lauren Filer bowls literally the fastest over ever bowled in recorded women's international cricket, and it goes for 14. India bowl 13 out of 20 overs at a spin, and even the 7 overs of pace that they bowl isn't what you'd describe as express pace.
That's
Um,
6 hour, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. Do you think that essentially the way sides are constructed is too speed heavy? If you look at England, even in the seam department, Izzy Wong's had a pretty good couple of games,
Mm.
taking pace off the ball a lot, and she was someone who first made a name for herself as someone who hit the speed gun hard. So do you think we get a little bit too excited? I know that Lauren Filer is very exciting to bowl. I'm not writing her off because of 1 over, but do you think more generally when you compare the two sides that this is potentially overblown a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's like, are we picking teams based on what gives us the best chance of being match winners and winning the game? Or are we picking things that look really exciting and entertaining? Because and probably just a bit like going into this method thing, right? Shafali Verma in the first game at Trent Bridge was in all sorts against the short ball. She had her knees near her armpits. She was getting hit on the helmet. She was in a right pickle. And then the next few games, she's got really leg side of it and basically like forehand smashed it over the offside or down the ground. Okay, so that's an example of changing your method to suit what's coming down at you. Essentially, quicker on, quicker off, isn't it? Like the faster the ball comes in, the faster it goes out. And if you can't do that with a lot of control, then the other side of pace is that it can be very expensive. Um, and I think I think I don't think you don't need more than one person that bowls, sort of 65 plus. You look at a lot of the women's sides, successful women's sides, don't play more than one quick. Like Australia might play Vlamic as a luxury bowler, Darcy Brown as a luxury bowler, but their predominant bowlers are the miserly, hit the stumps, got the skills like your Kim Garth, your Megan Shoots. You look at those sorts of bowlers, your Amanjot Kaurs, even over the years like Renuka Singh, Shikha Pandey, like these girls are not express pace, but they're skilled. They hit the stumps. They set fields to back up their deliveries. And it really is about as simple as that. I mean, it's exciting to have pace. It's entertaining. The crowd loves it. Um, but it's got to be what gives you the best chance of winning. And that might be pace at times, but it might not be.
We talked about the difference between conditions in domestic games and international venues before. The most notably, we talked about how few women's domestic games are day-nighters and a lot of international games are day-nighters and how that affects catching. And we saw England shell a lot of catches in the game at the Oval. I think 6 catches went down. But also, I wonder as well in terms of ground dimension sometimes as well. So I watched a lot of cricket in Beckenham this year, and the boundaries have been in, the outfield's been absolutely rapid and
The
350.
M25.
Yeah, they're playing on the M25.
We're renaming Beckenham the M25.
They're playing on the M25, and not the boundaries are not only small, but the outfield is absolutely rapid. But you go to a venue like Old Trafford this week, and as you say, boundaries are out. There's no short boundary. That almost brings in the slower bowlers more because you watch these games at 50 over games at a 350 plays 340. There are loads of sixes that only just go over the boundary rope. That you're actually like in an international, that's not going anywhere near the boundary rope. Do you think that brings in slower bowlers in a way that we might not actually appreciate as much in domestic cricket too?
Oh, 100% without a shadow of a doubt. And I think, that's where you've got to almost put context into where you're scoring your runs, who's taking wickets where. It's not just a blanket thing of, well, they've scored a lot of runs. Like, where have they scored a lot of runs? They've taken a lot of wickets. Well, where have they taken a lot of wickets? So I always think there's got to be context into success and performances. And on the flip side of that, like, yeah, it was interesting that they got a big boundary because really in England, like you should have control over the pitch and the boundary sizes, like I know it's the home advantage, you should be saying, well, we want 60 we want 60 all the way round, and requesting what you want. Obviously, the other day it was a bigger boundary, which massively plays more into slower bowling, of course, because you have to generate the distance and the power and the trajectory. So yeah, but then you've got to be able to like you can't just say, well, I'm really good at playing on 55 yards when it's flat. It's like, well, you're probably going to have quite a short-lived career and it's going to be very much like 80 off 50 and then nothing, 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 nothing. So yeah, you want to try and be consistent on most surfaces more often than not. But yeah, I do think it definitely plays into slower bowlers. I just think they've bowled better as well. Like they've bowled to their fields. They've changed their pace really well. That, like I say, the fielders have matched that up. They've cut a lot of twos. Like Jemmy's cut a lot of twos. Arundhati Reddy, Radha Yadav, Dipti Sharma, Amanjot Kaur. Like they've all got gun arms on the boundary edge and they're quick. So I do think yeah, I think the other night it fell into their hands a little bit with the surface and the pitch size. But England should just be better. Like they need to be better than that if they want to be competitive. And I don't really know where it's all gone wrong. Like it's just not good enough at the minute, any of it. And it's hard to really pinpoint one factor because there's been times when the bowling's been poor or the tactics have been poor, but then there's been times when the batting's been poor and the fielding's been poor. So it's like, it's just all 70% at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a theory that basically in the last not very many years at all, T20 cricket has changed loads, and there's so much tactics, there's so much plan management, and it's less about skills. It's about sticking to your plans and being like quite compact as a unit, and that is just very very different to that's different to how you get yourself into an England team. You get yourself into an England team because you score lots of runs, or you take lots of wickets, but so much of T20 cricket in particular is just about like, do you execute your plan? If you've got three fielders out the leg side boundary, are you bowling it straight enough? That is so much part of it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's very tactical. I think it's hugely tactical T20 cricket. And really like the simplicity of it is that England have had bizarre plans at times, bizarre matchups at times, and haven't executed that. And India have got better matchups and they've bowled to the field.
Mm.
And it really is as simple as that, isn't it? Like you say, if you've got three out on the leg side and mid off, they haven't bowled short and wide.
Mm. Yeah.
Bowled into the pitch on leg stump, or they've bowled straight and got hit down the ground to their fielders. Whereas, England have set fields and then got hit to space. So you've not bowled to your field. Like I always think, like I always say to the bowlers, I'm like, if you get hit over your fielder's head for 6, or you get missed for 4 either side, no dramas. Like, that's fine. Good shot, well played. You've executed one you want to bowl. If you've got cover up and you've missed short and wide, that's not good enough. So it's, yeah, it like you say, it's simple in principle, isn't it?
Well, it's not gone well for England so far. One more game to go on Saturday. You feel like the series will look very different depending if it's 4-1 or 3-2. Cheers for your time, Lauren. Catch you next week.
Thanks, mate.
Couple of bits of admin to get through before I go to Ben and Katya. So number one, we're doing daily podcasts on the Patreon channel after every day of playing both England men's and England women's international cricket. So if you want our immediate reaction to all the England-India games, head to the Patreon. You can join on the Wisden bronze level from just £5 a month plus VAT. Get involved. The Discord community is great. Loads of people involved in the live chat whilst the games are going on. And also, Katya, you have a shiny new newsletter.
Yeah, so I've got a newsletter every week that is free of charge, straight into your inbox every Wednesday. You get a column on whatever I found interesting that week. So last week we had a column on Danny Wyatt-Hodge and why now might have been the time. This was written before her innings, she very promptly got half century as soon as I sent that off, why this might be her time to step away from the T20 side. This week there's a piece on what the Jamie Smith's future in Test cricket might look like. You also get my weekly recommendations of stuff that I've read or listened to elsewhere that might be interesting, and you'll also get the pod directly into your inbox every week, free of charge. So
free of charge, and we'll include a link in the show notes for today.
So it sounds like we should back Jamie Smith for a pair at Lords this week.
Ben, England win that third game at the Oval. You were there. Sophia Dunkley and Danny Wyatt-Hodge putting on 137 for that first wicket, which is more than England managed in total in Manchester. And without Nat Sivabrun and Heather Knight, it feels like England are very, very reliant on those two in particular in T20s.
Yeah, they are. I mean, that third game, I don't want to forget about it just because England have now lost the series, because it was
it's easier from a narrative point of view if we forget about it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but it's just great fun, a great occasion. But yes, they are reliant on those two, and the fact that you have your two most consistent players are not in the side, and Wyatt-Hodge, who is still consistent, even though she obviously can get out in some frustrating ways sometimes. She is out of form and is not at the moment. And actually, Dunkley, to her credit, I think we could kind of, because England have basically gone a bit of a downer since the end of that World Cup, so she comes in after that World Cup, she's actually been pretty good in that time. But yeah, beyond that, it's not just the consistency though, it's the because you have players, it's not like players are looking like they can't survive at all. It's that they're almost trying to be cautious because they don't want to play the shot that when someone else has just got out, you come in, you play a shot, and that's a collapse in progress. They're kind of rein themselves in for a bit, and then getting out, playing the shot when they think is the right time to, and then actually you've set yourself even further back, and that's how you get these situations where England actually sort of do well to go up to 1-2-7 with numbers 8 and 9 hitting some 4s and 6s at the back of the end of the innings, which is a strange position for a side to get into who are second in the world rankings at home, who generally go into global tournaments as contenders to be so thoroughly outclassed. And obviously missing 2 players will maybe do that, but we've talked about England's lack of depth, the lack of players who are able to come through and be the players they can count on. This was a real chance, when without some authority there, without some experience there, to be like, no, I'm going to be the player. And unfortunately, that's just not happened.
Katya, more generally, looking at the series, how disappointing is it from an England point of view? Because sure, missing 2 very important players, but there's a lot of international experience in this squad, and it's 3-1 at home, and some of the defeats have been really quite comprehensive.
Yeah, I think it's really disappointing. I don't think we should actually play down how big the 2 players that they're missing are. Like particularly yesterday in the fourth T20, you really saw how much England missed Nat Sciver-Brunt and Heather Knight in those middle overs. England didn't score a boundary from over 11 to over 19 yesterday, I don't think. That wouldn't have happened if Nat Sciver-Brunt, even one of Nat Sciver-Brunt or Heather Knight was in at that stage. So while I agree with your point that yes, it's an opportunity for young players to come in, and those young players haven't delivered in this case, to come in for Nat Sciver-Brunt and Heather Knight, that was always going to be a massive, massive ask. And England are very reliant on those 2 players. However, Nat Sciver-Brunt has had a lot more injuries over the last couple of years. Heather Knight as well is quite injury prone, quite illness prone. So, sorry, that made her sound sickly, but she has had a couple of times where she's been ill or injured. They have to find these players to make sure that they can cope with those 2 players going down injured, especially in India. Do you remember last year, was it, when John Lewis tried to replicate Heather Knight going down with Delhi belly or something like that? So that is a legitimate point, that they do have to be able to cope without these players in the side, and they've not found a way to do that. I think, as you said, what's really been disappointing is the way the senior players haven't stepped up in the last couple of games, or the last few games. You had Danny Whitehodge and Tammy Beaumont playing those innings in the third T20, the one that they won. But particularly yesterday, it really felt like there was a lack of taking the ball by the horns by the senior players compared to India's senior players. I mean, look at Smriti Mandhana, Harmanpreet Kaur. I guess you can also say Jamima Rodriguez, senior player now. They have completely taken that innings on, that chase on, and been really smart about the way they've approached it. They've picked off the boundaries when they could. They targeted England's seamers in the power play, who got their lengths completely wrong and got their speeds completely wrong. And there was just no smarts or game awareness by the England batters. And pound for pound, when you look at those lineups, without Nat Sciver-Brunt and Heather Knight, you can say that India are slightly stronger. But the gap should be nowhere near as big as it's been made to look in the games that England have lost. These are senior players, your Tammy Beaumonts, your Danny Whitehodges, your Sophia Dunkleys, your Amy Joneses. And you can talk about a side in transition all you want, and Charlotte Edwards did after the game. She said it was going to take time. It shouldn't be taking that kind of time. England are just not as good as India, but they're not. The gap between the 2 sides shouldn't be as big as it's been made to look by India, particularly in the batting department.
But I just wonder, looking at England, the batting quality is vast. I'm not sure it's how much it is tactics. It's just England don't look like they're able to score boundaries. If you say England go 8 overs without scoring a boundary in the back half of the innings, they're going at 6s in the power play. India hitting them hard with spin, even their seamers aren't particularly quick. It just looks like England can't score enough boundary for a T20 side. Dunkley and Whitehodge do it in the 3rd game, but in the 4th game, it's not as if England had a top order blowout. Loads of them faced 15 to 23 balls, and they didn't get in.
Yeah, exactly. And if you look at how that partnership actually played out in that 3rd game, was quite interesting, and maybe instructing that Dunkley is able to get off to a bit of a flyer, which allows Whitehodge to actually bed in and then to kind of go through the gears. And I guess at the moment, part of the thing with the partnerships as well is that you're having both players having to do their bedding in kind of at the same time, and then having to sort of then realising how far behind the rate they're getting and then go harder. But yeah, but it does look more than anything just that the options they just don't seem to have to take on the spinners, and how that allows India to then constrict them elsewhere by squeezing them in the field, because they know they're not going to have to be chasing balls to the rope. What there was the Capsey dismissal yesterday. She's had a tough few weeks with drop catches as well as with the bat, and she premeditates one bit, so premeditated that she's quite easily outfoxed. And I guess England spinners have bowled well at times, but they've got such a consistent opening partnership that they're always just ahead of the game, and England have always been playing catch up. And as Kash said, with the power play bowling, I mean, it's hard to know which has been England's weaker suit this series, because whichever first innings has ended, if they batted or bowled, they generally ended it quite far behind the game. In the first game, Mandana makes that century, England gets smashed by their record defeat. This game, England, get up to 127 and are fighting to make that much. It is just a big gap between the side, and it can't just be tactics.
But I think the tactics are really important. Like, you can say that India's opening partnership has been a lot better than England than it has, but England have kind of almost facilitated some of that. Like the Filer to Shafali Verma line match-up last night just looked like completely the wrong match-up. Shafali Verma is going to belt any pace that's on the ball, and Filer was bowling extremely fast, and she just should not have been bowling where she was. And then Lauren Bell was also very loose first up, so they've allowed the openers to get off to a really good start. So India have been really good, but England have also facilitated that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess if we're looking at last night in particular, obviously India going with the extra spinner, I think, and able to sort of make the most of the ground dimensions and the surface at Old Trafford in a way that England, firstly, they partly couldn't because of the team they'd picked, and you might wonder, should they pick an extra spinner? Then you're wondering, well, then which quick do they leave out? Is it Bell, the attack leader? Is it Filer, who is the quickest bowler in the world right now, or is it Wong, who actually bowled really well and is the best at taking pace off the ball out of those three? But then also, you're bang on. I think that could they have then targeted those two with spin earlier on, given that what they've tried to do with pace first up hasn't worked. So I guess they think that those are our two wicket takers. We need wickets early on if we're going to stand any chance. So let's give the ball to them. But hindsight shows that wasn't the right way to go.
Just quickly on Izzy Wong, quietly impressive return to the fold, and it's obviously not in the headlines because England have lost the series, but she's almost like rebranded herself a little bit as a bowler, taking the pace off more. And she came through initially, all the talk was about the speed gun, but she's been very effective doing something slightly different. Yeah,
she was really, really good. But again, it wasn't a surprise on that surface that as soon as you took pace off the ball, that was what was going to be effective. And I think it just took England far too long to realise that. But she has been really, really good. And I think that rebrand is an important one. It's like we said earlier, is there much point being a fast bowler in the women's game, to be honest, if you're just going to get belted? But maybe Wong's been really smart to realise that and has branded herself as someone who bowls some of the best slower balls in the game.
Yeah, and sorry, just in that third game, obviously she ends up with great figures last night, but in that third game, it was an extraordinary comeback. Like, I know that so India needed 7s off the last 7 overs with 9 wickets in hand. And then Filer bowls, the fastest over in women's cricket history until she goes even faster last night. And Wong as well at the death was really, really good. And Dean held on to, what felt like, one of the great catches given all the drops that had come before it. So, and it was a brilliant finish. And Wong was a big part of that, basically, with her death bowling and doing it in a different way to England's other bowlers.
Just on the fielding, 6 drop catches at the Oval. Why does it keep happening?
I genuinely don't know how much more I can talk about this. I thought Lauren was on the coverage last night, and she made the point that England were actually really poor in the field against the West Indies as well. And I think we almost glossed over that slightly because they were winning, and they were winning by a long way. But you can be poor in the field against a side like the West Indies, and it doesn't really matter, and it's easy to kind of ignore as a side, or not ignore, but not put the amount of importance it should be on it. But when you're dropping Smith Mandana 3 times in an innings, or Shafali Verma or whatever, or you Lauren Bell and you put down 3 catches within a few overs against India, that's going to really, really hurt you. And Edwards also talked about that post-game on Sky last night, and she did say it's a mindset thing. It's not that we're not training fielding or we don't put emphasis on it. It is a complete mindset thing. And she said, having seen England now put under pressure for the first time in her role, she now has a greater understanding of the work they need to do as a side. No closer to understanding how you actually do address that kind of issue. I don't know whether you get psychologists on it. I don't know whether it's constant exposure therapy. I have no idea. But it genuinely, if England had fielded better during the series, the scoreline wouldn't be as, I don't think the scoreline would be as big as it has been. And that was a real point of difference as well. When you look at India, who traditionally have been a side that we've looked at and gone, their fielding is terrible. They've been really, really good in the field for the last, they've had a couple of drop catches in the first couple of games, but particularly last night, they were really, really good. They looked energised in the field. They looked hungry. And you can't say the same for England in the field at all.
Ben, what do you put it down to?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a self-repeating element to it in that Oval game, ironically, the one they won was the one where there were the most drop catches, I think. But so when the first one goes up, you kind of, because it's been, it's a little while since last game, so it's like, well, oh great, England have got their first wicket, top edge off Verma, it's going down to Bell, and then it just kind of plops in, plops out. It's like, okay, I guess it's happening again. And then from that point on, whenever a catch is going up, you are expecting it to go down, not expecting it to go in. And obviously that's watching from the stands or in the press box, but you can kind of just feel that that's how it's going on the field as well. So like that, so that each drop catch they make that happens makes it more likely they're going to drop the next one. The one thing I wondered with the Oval, because it just was so bad, is the and we've talked about this with the T20 World Cup as well, is like what is the impact of fielding under lights, I guess. And actually, like, there's not loads of day night games that women get to play in general. I don't think training under lights is a difficult thing to arrange, and is that something that is there a way to just get a bit more time under that in a way that would be different? In the men's game, even if you're like an 18-year-old, you're getting your first go in the Blast, you will be playing quite a lot of evening games and then getting that practice, even if you're not doing the training when you're growing up. So that is something possibly practical, but for the most part, I don't think it can be a training thing. Like, Charlotte Edwards is not going to come in and not have them practicing catches. I think it is just like, and I guess it's kind of like the pressure question is that, like, it's a different sort of pressure when that catch goes up, but it's like they have felt been in these situations before and it's gone badly, and that means that next time it's going to go badly, basically.
That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Katya. Cheers, Ben. Cheers for listening. We'll be back on the Patreon after the 5th and final T20I on Saturday.